One. Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for March 1st, 2022. I certainly want to acknowledge our Mayor and Council, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Peter Vanstrom, Councilmember Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of the city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates city administrator as the chair of committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at our regularly scheduled city council meetings held at 7:00 p.m. in the city council chambers, the second and fourth Monday of each month, and then on the fifth Monday in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms, and if you have any questions or need information regarding any matter, please reach out to our staff. We're available to provide that information to you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for January 25th, 2022. I would entertain a motion of approval.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Vanstrom.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hills. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Thank you very much for unanimous approval. Next item we have is from Community Development, the consideration of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code to Article 14 definitions. Yes, Ms. Jackie Dybel.
Good evening, everyone. This is a proposed text amendment to the Unified Development Code in the definitions section, Article 14, to add definitions as requested for apartment and for condominium. So what we've got here is what we looked at as the definitions that staff suggested. However, I did take a look at other jurisdictions, and those were included in the PowerPoint. We'll go through those to see what you guys might want to change, or if you feel that this is what you would like to start and move forward with, we can do that as well. So this definition, if you looked at the PowerPoint, is from the actually city of Marietta. For an apartment unit, one or more rooms with a private bath and kitchen facilities, comprise an independent self-contained dwelling unit in a building containing more than two dwelling units, and then a condo definition of a building or group of buildings in which units are owned individually, and the structure, common areas, and facilities are owned by all the owners on a proportional, undivided basis. So this is a definition from Sandy Springs for dwelling unit. They did not have a definition separated for apartment or for condominium. This is what they have for dwelling unit. One or more rooms of building constructed with cooking and sleeping and sanitary facilities for limited use as living quarters. This is what the city of Alpharetta had. One or more rooms comprising an independent dwelling unit in a for-rent building. Condo, they had a legal form of multiple ownership consisting of a building or group of buildings, which are owned. So this is very similar to what Marietta had. However, they also had this. And I thought this was a bit lengthy for our definition of a condominium. So I wasn't sure where you wanted to go, but I wanted to put it in here so that you could at least take a look at it. This kind of sounds like they're talking about the condominium residential if it's within a larger development. But I'm not sure, but this was in their definition section of their code. So I didn't know if you wanted me to read through all this or if you've already looked at it. We'll go on to the next jurisdiction here. They also had a definition of dwelling unit, which is very similar to what Sandy Springs had. Fulton County had these definitions. Also a form of ownership for condominium. They also had definition of a multifamily structure containing 3 or more dwelling units. they had a quadruplex, and then they had a dwelling unit definition. They had nothing specific for apartment. These are the two that I used in the one that we've prepared for you this evening. This is what we got from the city of Marietta, I believe. And then they also had a definition for a quadruplex and a dwelling unit. The city of Johns Creek had apartment, dwelling multifamily. So that's what they've used for their apartment definition. And once again, the condominium is the form of ownership by state law. So some of those are very similar in what we've seen around the other local jurisdictions. And I believe that's all I have. Do you have any questions, or do you like the definition that we have here, or do you want to do something different?
Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knight, and I appreciate it. And Ms. Dabble, thank you for walking through this, and appreciate the basically really what you've put together and what you've brought to us. I definitely think it's kind of a discussion that we've had over many years now. And so, and when I say we, actually, of just, multiple city councils and public discussions, et cetera, I think it is valuable and helpful to kind of define and separate. So I definitely appreciate this initiative that you've taken. As for the definition, I'm kind of leaning towards between basically what you've proposed and the Alpharetta definition. So kind of perhaps some merging.
This one here?
Somewhat, I think this one right here is what I was thinking. But that being said, and I certainly would like to have a discussion of this tonight. I do want to give just give a heads up that my initial thought is we discuss it tonight, but I think there's some components that I think we should discuss adding, in which case my initial leaning, unless this committee thinks it is better to move it straight to initiation, my initial leaning is wanting to kind of work through this and bring it back to next committee. And the reason being is, did you have a so let's just say this committee decides that they want to just go ahead and move forward with let's just say your recommended language. That would then update the code and there'd be the different language. What ends up being the impact to that? So if council does initiate your definitions, those get adopted into the code, then basically what does that mean for a developer, for a rezoning, for just anything at all? What do you see as the impact of that?
So if you take a look at the one that's here, this is just straight out a definition only. That's all it would be. That's all we're looking to do, is to define it so that someone coming forward in the future would understand what an apartment definition is, what comprises it, and what a definition for a condominium would be, to clearly define the difference between the two. So if you wanted to indicate for rent, because technically we want that information in there, that could be something that's added specifically for the apartment. If you want condominiums to be for sale, and you want to add something like that in there, that would be, you could put that in the definition as well, and that would be clear for anybody in the future.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. And what I'll say is, part of my thought process on why my initial reaction is leaning towards wanting to bring this back to committee is because I'd like to certainly see us coming up with that definition, and at the same time knowing that it's a long process to update the code. I do lean towards wanting to not only bring forward the definition, but bring forward the impact as well. And there's two examples that come to mind for me. One example that comes to mind for me is in the city of Alpharetta, where this becomes really relevant is when requesting a conditional use. Not only is it requesting a conditional use of multifamily, but by requesting a conditional use of apartment, there's actually a limited time frame for that to get developed for it, and there's some other rules or concepts that go into it. And so, for example, there's been situations in Alpharetta where an apartment complex or apartment building gets approved as for rent apartments, and then whatever criteria ends up changing, in which case, whether it be time frame or other criteria, et cetera, so that developer who had an approved conditional use for multifamily and apartments ends up losing the apartments one, in which case having to convert it to for sale. So I think there's two examples where I've seen that in Alpharetta. So that's a component I'd like us to consider here on kind of what's the impact of having the definition. That's one thing. And then another thing for consideration is, I guess, wondering, and this would be really probably require some legal research between now and next time this would be discussed, but technically what's to stop an apartment landlord from just buying an entire condominium building and renting it out, in which unless we were to add some language in there on number of owners or number of rentals or whatever it might be. And I'm not even sure if that's the right idea or not. I'm just here thinking aloud in a committee meeting. But those are just some different thoughts on kind of looking at putting the definition in, and really what the impact is and what opportunities that gives both the city council as well as the community for when there is a request. And the last thing I'll mention before giving up the rest of my time is that for everyone to remember, here's what the process is, that, and this is really for the public, because obviously everyone up here knows this, but for anyone listening in, is today is a committee meeting where this is being discussed. Should council vote to move this to a council meeting for initiation? And if committee today does vote to move it to the next council meeting for initiation, then at that council meeting, it would be discussed, there'd be public comment, and there'd be a vote. And if it's voted to be initiated at that council meeting, then it would move to planning commission. Then it would move back to council for a first reading. And then there'd be public discussion, there'd be a vote. If it moves past that, it would move to a second reading, more public discussion, another opportunity for a vote. And if voted in, that's when it become law. And I bring that up too, just for the committee to realize, for the community to realize there's certainly a lot of good opportunity to discuss this pros and cons, what different aspects are perhaps being left out. And I also bring it up for this committee because, again, my initial reaction is this doesn't have really the enough meat in it to move to council for initiation. But knowing that it's a long process, this committee might disagree with me and feel maybe it's better to move it to initiation and have some meat for staff to discuss at the initiation, be voted upon. So that's always an option. But just wanted to bring up either way, knowing it's certainly a long process when changing a law and a code.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Thank you for that commentary as well. I just have a question. Can you go back to the definition from Alpharetta where it's that one, condominium residential? Do they have a definition for condominium commercial? And how does this, would we have to define commercial condominiums because there are commercial condominiums? Would that?
I believe they did, and I have to take a look again. But I picked out the residential one since we were talking about residential type of uses, but they might have had one, and I have to look at it again.
So probably a good idea to look at the commercial side because some of those are ownership type of units as well. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Jackie, thank you. I like the simplicity and the clarity of your definitions. Kind of echoing Councilmember Palermo and Councilmember Hall's perspective, I want to add something to the conversation for us to think about. So I know that the council going forward has some clarity about what they would like to have the ability to do. And I can see that you are trying to address that with some clarity. One of the things when I look at the condominium definition, I like the apartment definition, and I like this residential definition from Alpharetta, but I still see a hole. And the hole that I see is, for example, if we, in our 20-year planning, determine to do a mixed-use development, where we say we're going to do 25% O&I, 25% retail, 25%, if you will, residential, and 25% multifamily. I think we've got to be able to provide clarity that 25% residential means that's ownership, and that the 25% multifamily, we're saying that is rental. And one of the challenges that I think we have currently, if we do a development like that, is we put that, say it's 25 residential, 25% multifamily, is that the developer currently, from my understanding, can take that residential with the understanding that it is residential, i.e. ownership, and ultimately rent it out themselves. And I think so that's a hole for us that we've got to say, we got to plug that hole. Because if we mean residential, i.e. ownership, it needs to be ownership. It doesn't need to be rental. And I noticed, and I don't know where the townhome or the cottage piece descriptions fall into this in terms of needing to define those or not define those with respect to condominium. But I know that's a hole we have got to plug, which is, and when we say, if we decide to do long-term development and it's a mixed-use development and we put pro rata shares into the code and come to an agreement with the developer and say 25% retail, 25% O&I, 25% residential, 25% for in the vernacular multifamily. For us, we want that to mean 25% ownership and 25% rental. Obviously, if it's less rental, I don't think anybody here will say no, but we don't want it to go the other way. And I think currently that can happen in our current system, in our current code.
So question, so we need to look into legality and try to figure out how do we put it in for what you're looking for, as to say if you're going to do 25%, let's just say what you just indicated, how do legally and how can we put it in here so that we have that in the code? So that's something we'll have to talk with legal about then.
Let me be more specific. There is a development that is currently multifamily and townhomes. And legally, the understanding was when the development was put together, from my understanding, it was that the multifamily was going to be apartments and the townhomes were going to be ownership. Mm-hmm. Legally, that developer can turn those townhomes into rental. And I don't think that is the design nor the desire of the council. Right. And so we got to fix that.
Councilmember, I think I saw Councilmember Morthland first, and I'll come to you.
They kind of hit on the main question I had, and that was, can we just add what the true definition of a townhome would be to this?
Okay.
Townhomes.
Yeah, we do. Might be under dwelling. Take a look.
While she's looking for that, did you want to proceed, Councilmember Morthland, were you?
That's all I have.
Okay. Councilmember.
I think too often we task Jackie with looking things up while we're still talking to her. So I think I'll let her, because I know, I believe there is a definition of
Okay.
townhome already, and that was one of my questions.
Actually, in Article 2, not Article. Yeah, I'm going in there. I was back at 14, but it's actually in Article 2 under building types. So, because it is a building type as well, and it says, a building type that accommodates 3 or more dwelling units where each unit is separated vertically by a common side wall. Units cannot be vertically mixed. So that's the definition that we currently have as a building type for townhouse in the Unified Development Code. So if you want something a little bit different, we can look into that.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Yes, and I think that would go back to what Mayor Wilson was talking about, is it defined by ownership? And that's something that we do have to address. I do want to try and bring this back to a little more of a simplification. This right here, as I understand, is to change the definition of apartment or separate out a definition for an apartment and a definition for a condominium, which currently is not in the UDC, correct? Okay, so we have a lot of other things to unpeel and discuss, and I completely agree with all the comments so far. I don't think it's that difficult to come up with 2 definitions and move this forward and create the opportunity then to have defined apartment unit definition, defined condominium definition as we start to proceed forward in discussing ownership, and I think we need to decide if it's gonna be condominium, it's gonna have the word ownership, and it does here, which is what I was looking for and hoping for. I would like to see apartment have a rental in that description. And I think that's the task at hand today in what I'm gathering. And we have yet to peel the onion back on multifamily and deciding, is multifamily too broad, including apartment units with condominium units and with townhome units. And then we've got the term dwelling. And dwelling makes it a little murkier. And so what I would love to see is, I agree with Councilman Palermo, I'd like to see more discussion on this entire topic. I'm not sure that we can't come up with a solution today for a definition. We'd like to move forward on apartment units and condominiums, which is what is currently before us. If we can at least discuss that, I would like to do that. And I'd like to add rental, as in Alpharetta's, I believe it says, for rent building. I'm not sure that's the best term. Does the whole building have to be a rental? If we're looking at mixed use, then it's not the whole building. So we just need to imply that it's a rental unit.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Is there anything in there, forgive my ignorance here, regarding condos or townhome associations where the board once formed? I know brand new, you haven't got a board yet, but like in an HOA, where the HOA makes the decision on whether or not there is a restriction on number of rentals in, say, a neighborhood versus a townhome or condominium association?
We don't have anything of that in the Unified Development Code about the association itself.
Are those just on a case-by-case, association by association, HOA by HOA?
It's normally put together by the developer who creates the condominium development or the apartment development. They would, on their own, choose to make a HOA at that point in time. But we don't have anything about that in here.
So at that time, they could potentially
Yes, they can.
hold all the power
Yes.
before anyone steps foot into said unit.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll add one more thing. If there's an HOA and there's a plat that's required, they do have to give us a copy of the covenants at the time of the plat. But that's for them to set up and get recorded with Fulton County. So,
Okay, but we don't have anything on the books that would prevent, let's say hypothetically, a developer from, the units are never even on the market, or even a homeowners association being built. The homes, the plats aren't even on the market, and they've come in and,
we don't have anything in the code for what you're looking at,
Okay.
what you're asking about.
got it, thank you.
Any further comments or direction at the moment? Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Peter, were you saying move forward with these two definitions? Is that what you're saying?
I'd like to move forward with the definitions adding for rent somehow in the apartment phrase, that we can hammer that out. And if Councilman Palermo is seeing this as a constructive exercise in the definition itself, and that, I mean, we're very much in agreement that we have a lot of other things we want to cover that Mayor Wilson put it so well. We've got ownership versus rental definitions, a lot that we need to be defining and when and where. But that would be my motion, would be to move it forward, adding specifically for rent for apartment units.
Well,
Yes.
so maybe we say one or more rooms with a private bath and kitchen facilities comprising an independent, self-contained dwelling unit in a contained you wanted it at the unit, right? So for rent dwelling unit in a building containing more than two, or something in that regard, because you didn't want for rent building. Was that what it was?
Well, I thought for rent building, because we're talking about multi-use, and then
Okay,
it becomes a little, any other suggestions? I mean, you could say for rent, one or more rooms with private bath.
You could put it that way too.
Any other thoughts?
I like the beginning part. Say it.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Just my only comments are, I think there's some other definitions that we need to include, and like on the commercial that aren't here, and I would be more inclined to bring it back to committee again in a more encompassing way before we moved it to council.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
So based upon Christine and Michael, y'all's comments, let's make I'd make a suggestion that perhaps, Mike, in the next 2 weeks, I guess, when would we come back committee on this? End of March. So in the next 4 weeks, we come back and we have this ready to go in totality, ready to go next time. Is that fair? That'd be my recommendation if we're not going to move it on. And we'll, so the next time this comes up a month from now in committee, we're agreed and ready to rock and roll on the definitions. Does that sound reasonable?
I think that does, and then I guess my question, though, would be, if this is gonna come back in a month, do we want it coming back with just the definitions and the expectation that we have some definitions that we hash out and agree upon to move to initiate only? Or that there would be basically rules or things to go around it? What's this committee's pleasure and preference?
Councilmember Hall?
I don't know if we could consider just bringing the definitions to the committee meeting for administration and finance, just as a special item in that meeting in 2 weeks, and then in 4 weeks, bring back the more encompassing topics. Just throwing that out there.
All right. Councilmember Vanstrom, yes.
What I would say is, I don't know I'd like for us to discuss right now, what are the expectations of what we're going to be bringing forward beyond 2 definitions? What's the expectation there? Because this, in my opinion, sets us up for further conversation, because we have a lot of conversation ahead. And I think if you were saying what I thought you were saying, is that you're like, let's move this, but we've got all these other things that we do need to discuss. And that's what I favor, because we've just got to start separating these out. And you guys have done a wonderful job of trying to get that going. There's going to be plenty of discussion on these two definitions as we go through Planning Commission and back to Council. Council first, then Planning Commission, and then back. So I just feel like, let's define them. And I don't think in 2 weeks, that, to be honest with you, my fear is in 2 weeks, there's so much to talk about in these other areas. I love the fact that we're headed that direction, and it's funny coming from me. City administrator, you know, I'm always chomping to do things as fast as we can do them, but I know it's going to take time, and I appreciate at least getting some definitions in order.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
So Peter, you're comfortable with moving these forward and knowing that the conversation ongoing at council meeting, then planning, then council reading 1, council reading 2, you know these are going to get changed a little bit, and you're comfortable with that process, and that we're going to, we're going to make sausage on these over the course of those meetings. And that's kind of what you're saying. We got a basis, let's go ahead and move on with this.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
I don't know how much sausage we're going to make out of it, because it's just 2 definitions. I think it's going to bring the conversations forward to these other items that we all are waiting to talk about and discuss and finalize. And that is wonderful to hear, because we need to move forward in that direction. These are just simply definitions, and I don't think they're going to take a lot of change and direction of what they are at this point. But there is a lot more to discuss. I think it's a good foundation to start. Look at how much we just started discussing just based on 2 definitions.
Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Given that it is 2 definitions, I'm pretty indifferent whether we go with, Councilmember Hall brought up, instead of bringing this back in a month to the next ComDev committee, we just bring it to the next Admin Finance and move it forward there. I'm also indifferent if, given the fact that it is just 2 definitions if we just go ahead and vote that we want to initiate this at the next city council meeting, in which case, again, of course, we could fine tune the exact wording that night, just as the planning commission might have different recommendations for us to fine tune, et cetera. So I'm kind of indifferent between those two choices.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Mike, if we're indifferent, then kind of like per Peter's suggestion, if we brought this back 2 weeks with a special committee meeting and nothing changed, I would advocate then go ahead and start the process moving forward tonight.
Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
I'd say I do picture a word here, a word there changing and all that. The question is basically, should we have that discussion at city council meeting at the initiation, which I think is fine, which is common and I think works well and great to hear from, hopefully the public will be there to add some comments as well to help with the fine tuning. But I just want to make sure that this committee is aware that whether we're going to do it 2 weeks from now at a committee or at a council meeting at the initiation, either way, I think it'll be helpful for us to really kind of talk through the exact words and finalize the exact words moving forward.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
I would, based upon that, I would highly encourage my colleagues that the vigorous debate take place in committee meeting either tonight or 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now. Obviously, public comment will weigh in, and public comment will be at the council meeting, and that's important. But I think for the purposes of our making our sausage, the committee meeting is that valuable process that I think we really need to kind of stay true to that. So whether it's tonight or 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, that would be my request.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Just to clarify, currently, multifamily includes condominium and apartment, with no clear definition in the UDC as to which is which?
Correct. Both multifamily includes condominium and apartment in the correct.
With no clear definition of.
No definitions.
Okay, so what a wonderful opportunity to hash this out in committee and give us two definitions. I would love to see it happen right now. We have a limited agenda this evening that affords us the time that we rarely have. All I want to do is add for rent to apartment unit. Mike's got some brilliant words that he thinks he needs to add. Can we at least hear those, and then we can make a motion and we can decide whether we're happy to move it forward? Anybody that has additionals? We got 5 minutes.
I love the energy and the excitement, and I'm more of just actually not that I had the right words in mind. I just figured Councilmember Hills is going to have a certain comma to throw in. Councilmember Morthland might have a semicolon that he's very focused on. But on a more serious note, so could you read, Councilman Vanstrom, what you're proposing the full language be, or where that for rent goes?
Yeah, I would just suggest right off the bat, apartment unit. A for rent, one or more rooms with a for rent unit. How's that, Jackie? For rent unit with one or more rooms with private bath.
Can I ask
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
a question, Peter?
Yeah.
How would that impact the bed and bath, the BB and the hotel and the forgive my language? No impact.
No impact. That would not be considered multifamily. That would be a different
Bed and
different
breakfast?
use.
Well, the reason, when you say for rent, right, and some of that has an extended stay, there's no overlap in that?
I think that as long as you're defining apartment unit by itself, that's what this is, and you're not, I see where you're going, but I don't know that it goes there with just simply saying we're defining an apartment unit. Would that be correct, legal?
Or Ms.
Sure.
Dibble.
Michael, Mr. Petty?
If I could offer, maybe you can put it one or more rooms with private bath and kitchen facilities comprising an independent self-containing dwelling unit offered for rent in a building containing more than 2 dwelling units.
That's why you get the big bucks.
Yes.
Now, again, my other question is, how would it be addressed if a developer requests, they come in, they want to do rezoning multifamily, and they say condominium, and then it just they end up just singly owning it and wanting to just rent it out as an apartment building. How would we address that in the code?
So I think that's part of the discussion you've been having. Tonight, Councilmember Vanstrom indicated two definitions, but I think that was the further discussion that you guys were looking to have, and to figure out how do we address, as the mayor mentioned, looking at and saying it's for sale, but how do we make sure it's truly ownership? That's what you've indicated. So I think that's the further discussion that Councilmember Vanstrom indicated.
Well,
that
and-
opened up.
No, that is exactly, as my colleagues know, today, and it's gonna happen, a developer, well-intentioned, right, understands the marketplace, in the right place, says, hey, we're gonna put up so many apartment units, and we're gonna have a very clear definition, and we're gonna put up so many townhomes. And today, that developer could say, oh, I can make more money renting those than selling those. So instead of those being ownership, they all of a sudden become, in our current kind of vernacular, rental or multifamily. And I don't think that's our intent. We want to say to the developer, we agreed to your, what we call it, what we say, multifamily, we agreed to the rental piece, right? These 25% will be apartments, and 25%, for example, would be condominiums or townhomes. But they're ownership pieces. So you and I agree, i.e. the city and you and developer agree, that you're not gonna put those up for rent. Today, they can. So right now, we might have an understanding that they're gonna be apartments and townhomes, but if the developer decides to say, oh, I think I'm gonna rent the townhomes, we can't do anything about that. And I think we wanna change that.
Is Councilmember Vanstrom?
And I agree with that, and it's a wonderful point. And in fact, that townhome, and just to be clear, it's going to be corporately owned and then rented out, which is what you were saying. And this definition of condominium defines right there that each units are owned individually.
Can you own more than 2 or 3?
Now, I love that, and I think that specifies they are to be owned individually. Now, can that individual owner lease out his condominium? At this point in time, yes, they can, and that will probably continue as they're the owner. But it's a mortgage, and it's somebody who's more invested in the community, in my opinion, long term.
Great distinction. I mean, it's a great distinction that the individual property owner does have the right to rent their property, and we want that. We don't want to impact that right. We don't legally have the right to do that, nor do we want to be in that business. But we don't want a corporate entity saying we're going to be in the rental business and selling home business, and then all of a sudden, no, we're actually going to buy them and then we're going to rent them.
Yes.
And that's not the intent that we have as a city.
Yes, Councilmember Morthland had been waiting for a while. Okay, I'll come back to you. Councilmember Morthland. Okay, all right, you did. Councilmember Palermo.
So I think great discussion. My concern is, although it says in which units are owned individually, my concern is that there wouldn't be anything that staff would be able to act on with it. And that's where my thought process is going. And again, just thinking out loud, something along those lines of where no single owner owns more than 2 units or whatever it might be, something along those lines. And then that way, the way I'm envisioning this is the definition would actually be some enforcement in the sense that for them to have their approved zoning type, et cetera, the condominium, that was the rule, which is whatever that right number is. But let's just say it's something along the lines of no single owner could own more than 2. If you have a single corporate, entity trying to own all of them, clearly that's more than the number, in which case they are now no longer a condominium, in which case that's not what it was approved for. That's where my mind is going, that yes, I think we are gonna have, after doing the definitions, we're gonna have later discussions of, all right, what are all the big picture implications, et cetera. But I think we should be using the definition even as something to actually really have an impact, and to assure there's not a loophole of a single, REIT buying an entire condominium building to use it as an apartment building.
Yes, Councilmember Morthland?
I think a lot of the questions that they're posing could be addressed in condo questionnaires that are filled out by companies that are leasing these units or selling these units, one of the two. When you get into a Fannie and Freddie financing contingency, we that are putting together the finances for that individual to buy said unit have to fit the parameters. It's an ownership parameter, it's a single, they're 8 pages worth of conditions. Do we as a city go back and check with these owners from time to time to make sure that they're still falling within these parameters, or is it just kind of hitting us by surprise that, hey, we started off as a 5149 and now all of a sudden that's going out the window the next year?
I don't know if we've gone back and ever checked to see if somebody's, over the years, if they've done that or not. So I would have to say no, that we haven't checked that, unless there's something that I'm not sure of and I haven't heard of in the past.
Okay, that's got a lot of ideas, but it's too much right now. I've got to put it together.
Okay.
I'm in favor of kind of pushing this down for 2 weeks to where I can put my thoughts together, come back on that, and we talk about it at that point.
Mayor Wilson?
Well, it's a really good point you brought up. It's a salient point. But one of the things I want to make a clear distinction on is, like, right now, even outside of that, a developer has the purview to say, Councilman Morthland, we're going to put a development in your city, and 25% of the units are going to be multifamily, and 25% of the units are going to be condominiums, townhomes, inferring that it's 25% rental and 25% ownership. And there's an understanding, and you put the deal together with an understanding, i.e. like our mixed-use perception, like, okay, 25% rental, 25% ownership, we can make that work, can you pencil that, et cetera, et cetera. So you have clarity that you got 25% rental and 25% ownership from the developer. That developer today can decide, he or she, that they can turn that up, there'll still be 25% apartments, right? That's the build out, and 25% townhomes or condominiums. So they'll look different. But that developer can make those 25% rental on their own. And we don't want that. We want to make sure it's ownership. And that's a hole that we've got to fix. Can we do that legally? I'm pretty sure, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you're working at with
Yeah.
this.
Councilmember Palermo, and then Councilmember Landstrom.
So some great points, actually, both from the mayor and Councilman Morthland, and of course, everyone. But what I just had me thinking about is number one is, so if a developer comes in, requests, they're saying it's going to be condominium, it's going to be ownership. People will be able to get to build wealth by buying instead of it just being a hedge fund. And then if there's no legal condition attached to the zoning, anything like that, they go and just say, change their mind, it's apartments. And that's exactly what happened with Vickers. So Vickers was promoted as it was going to be condominiums, but there was no legal condition that was added related to it, and B, there was no definition or difference within the code. And I bring that up because if there is a rezoning that were to be requested prior to this council making any changes, just know that I'm certainly always focused on adding very detailed legal conditions, in which case this council will have the authority to regulate that. However, I think this is such an important thing, and this will be something that lasts long past any of us serving, which is why I think it's especially so important. And it will give more clarity to the developers looking at our code to see there is a difference, there is different rules. So that's why I think it's really helpful and valuable as well. But the good news is, as long as we add legal conditions, we are going to be protected for anything that comes in the near term. And then, Councilman Morthland, you brought something up that actually I think is relevant as well. So, there's been some great conversations on social media and just talking about really the greatest opportunity for anyone to build generational wealth is with home ownership. And, versus, of course, whether it's a large apartment building or something that we're going to address later on, hopefully in this committee meeting, when it ends up being a hedge fund or a REIT that's taking away the opportunity for Roswell residents or future Roswell residents to build up generational wealth. And of course, that's done through a mortgage and through the ownership. And regarding condo questionnaires, I don't know what they look like in the Roswell area, but actually in the Florida area, one of the questions ends up being either how many units or how many owners own 2 or more, or I forget what the exact thing is, and a mortgage company is less interested to, or less likely to want to loan a mortgage when there's too few owners within the condo complex. So the interesting aspect on by addressing this, if we address it right, that we're actually hopefully making it more attractive for lenders and more attractive for borrowers to be buying condos within Roswell. So just another thing I think we should keep in mind and might be a good positive impact of making this change.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion, because now we have taken a good hour, and it's been very constructive. But Christine, if you had a comment first.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
I just wanted to be clear that I understand the direction that we're planning to take, that tonight the intent is to just adopt a definition, just a simple definition, and then we're going to further look at options that we have to update the UDC, and that's what we'll bring back in 4 weeks. Is that what my colleagues are suggesting? No.
Yes. All right.
Okay. Go ahead, thank you.
Sorry. Councilmember Morthland, did you have any comment at this time?
So what Mike was talking about with the condo questionnaire, the specifics, really gets down into, from a condo point of view, is a warrantable as compared to a non-warrantable condo. To be warrantable, you have to fit certain criteria and you have to match all criteria. If you fall out of the warrantable status, then it's non-warrantable. Therefore, Fannie and Freddie and all the other entities, VA is something completely different, does not lend on those homes. You'd have to go private banking, private money at that point. So if we're allowed to push this down by 2 weeks and get some good insight on those type things, I can certainly feel comfortable in providing some more clarity around what we're getting at as compared to just kind of digging in at this point.
Okay, do we have a staff comment?
I just wanted to make a recommendation. The different things we're talking about, there are building types and then there's the uses. And so the multifamily is really a use. And so the definition of splitting them into apartment unit and condominium is really about the use. So one of the things that when Jackie was originally looking at this and she started down the path immediately and I stopped her was the use tables, and we have a multifamily line item. That needs to be split in our recommendation to these two once you've determined what that definition is, and then you choose where is that going to be. So anytime there's a conditional use for multifamily, you're now going to be splitting that into apartment, unit, or condo. So it actually now becomes a condition. They've asked for conditional use for condominium. They've asked for conditional use of apartment unit as opposed to multifamily. And so that would be an update to all the use tables once we settle on that definition. It could be the same all the way across the board and we just split it and that's what you guys want us to do? Or is there a choice that in this zone we really are cool with condominiums but we don't want the apartment unit and vice versa? So that would be a decision that you guys can make that doesn't necessarily impact these definitions, but is something that would follow up on that, and that would be our recommendation as a second piece to that. That could come back in 4 weeks, which I know is not necessarily what Councilmember Vanstrom was looking for. And I was also going to add, if I could, Councilmember Hall, your concern about residential versus commercial. The condominium definition, as Jackie has recommended, covers both. So the other one that was shown for Alpharetta regarding residential and the way they split it out was talking about architecture and number of floors and got into the weeds on the architecture side of it. So I think as long as the ownership versus rental is what you're concerned about, this should cover both of those, whether it's an office condo or a residential condo, it would kind of fall into the same. And I think they were just, for some reason, they have a definition but when you read it, it's all about architecture and looking like a single building and that sort of thing. So as far as that's concerned, I think from a residential perspective, this would be the thing you would be most focused on, just as a point of clarification for you.
Mayor Wilson?
Well, based upon that, I'm going to make a suggestion for someone to make a motion that we move these two definitions forward with the recommendation that in 4 weeks, in the next committee meeting, we deal with the use table. And that we can move forward on these two with an understanding that in 4 weeks, we deal with the use tables. That would be my recommendation if I'm hearing Lenore correctly.
Is the mayor, as the voting member, allowed to make a motion? It sounded kind of like a motion.
Just being,
Would you like to make that
I always like
motion?
council
Because-
making motions, but if you'd like me to, I will make a motion that we move forward on these two definitions with an understanding that in 4 weeks at the next Community Development Committee meeting, we deal with the use tables.
You want to add that to your motion to add that language that Mr. Petty suggested?
For the
That's-
renting. Can we still discuss?
Section 14.2 defined terms shall be, the motion is section 14.2 defined terms shall be amended by creating the following definitions. Apartment unit, one or more rooms with private bath and kitchen facilities comprising an independent self-contained dwelling unit offered for rent in a building containing more than 2 dwelling units. Condominium, a building or group of buildings in which units are owned individually and the structure, common areas, and facilities are owned by all the owners on a proportional, undivided basis.
Is that a form of a motion,
That is a
Mayor?
form of a motion,
All right.
yes, sir.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? Yes, Councilmember Hall. Excuse me.
Clarifying question.
Yes.
And that motion includes bringing back the use table in 4 weeks?
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. And that motion includes bringing the use table in 4 weeks at the next ComDev committee meeting.
So we have the motion with that amendment, and I assume your second is still second from Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. Thank you for a very good, productive conversation and discussion. Thank you. All right, next item is item, excuse me. Item number 3, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to authorize execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Milton to resurface King Road. Mr. Skowski.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I hope this is going to be a fairly simple item. We are in the process of repaving a number of streets in the city. King Road, which is shown on this map, crosses both the city of Roswell, or is within the city of Roswell, and the city of Milton. Milton has requested, and we support the idea of doing the entire road for everyone's benefit. This would be done through our standby paving contractor. Milton would execute, as well as we would, the memorandum of agreement that's included in your package, with one minor change, and that is, I believe it says it would be completed in February through April. We'd like to change that to February through May, just weather dependent and temperature dependent. We're not sure when we'll be back paving again due to the temperatures. And we'll each pay for our respective share. Roswell manages the contract and contractor. There's also a termination for convenience clause for both parties. We've done these before and think the cost sharing is reasonable and fair. We each pay for our respective portions. There's also a contingency on the Milton allocation of about 10%. We always run into repair situations in the field, so that's there specifically to accommodate any that may occur in the Milton section, and they will inspect their work. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, any questions for Mr. Skowski? Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
And I'm sorry, you may have clarified this. Was this already in the loop and in the line?
Yes, sir. This was our next priority to pave based on Roswell citizen requests. This road gets quite a bit of use, and it's in need of repaving right now.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Dan, sorry, I know that road well, travel it a lot. Would there be any thinking to waiting till June or July after school is out based upon the frequency of the high school traffic on this road?
It's a very reasonable and fair question, and I don't have a good answer for you. I would be happy to move this to later in the window of time that we could do it, just so we could consider that. I know we've got a number of folks who've asked about getting it paved as soon as possible, but that's a very reasonable thought.
Yes, Mayor, go ahead, Mel.
Dan, thanks. Yeah, you know that road. It's a heavily traveled road for particularly high school traffic. I think it would be a significantly less inconvenience to the residents if we could do that in June or July.
So I will make the change to the agreement so that it goes out through July, and I'll talk with our folks. I don't see any reason why we couldn't hold off, and unless there's some public outcry that it needs to be done sooner, but I think a lot of homeowners and
If there's an outcry,
parents
send them to
appreciate
Councilmember Mortland. He is the outcry for all King Road transportation issues. Thank you, Councilor Mortland, for volunteering for that.
Councilmember Hills.
Forgive my ignorance, that top portion that's noted red, does that abut Cox Road?
yes.
So this is just another squirrely portion. I looked all over the map and I couldn't, thank you.
Yes.
That's what I needed.
Yes, okay. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Skalski? No, oh, yes, Councilmember Morthland?
Just real quick, how long do you think this project would take, start to finish?
My estimation is definitely less than 2 months. Once we get going, it should be considerably less. I just don't have a good feel for that to give you a better answer.
Yeah, and the uncertainty of weather, of course, may play a factor, but, yeah, okay. All right. Any further comments or questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to move this item forward. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
You might let them know about Roswell Moves and the mayor's ride, because the bike's right up that road on April 24th.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Motion to approve with the amended language of, Dan, forgive me, August,
We'll go with August.
since it takes 2 months.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Second by motion by Mayor Wilson, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All right, approves unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item, item number 4, is a discussion of right-of-way disposal request of roadway near Greyhawk Lane.
I'm going to turn this over to Dave Cox.
All right, Mr. Cox?
No problem. Thank you. Good evening. We're here to talk about the guidance we need on the right-of-way property located off of Greyhawk Lane. This is kind of in the southeastern part of Roswell here. This is the parcel in question. Greyhawk Lane is a cul-de-sac in the it's Windfair. Sorry, I almost said Windmere. It's in the Windfair subdivision located just off of Martin's Landing. This was a public right-of-way parcel that we acquired through the developer when they built the subdivision due to the UDC code, where staff routinely ask subdivisions or developers to provide a stub street for further connection to other roads or transportation facilities. So this one was acquired, I think, a few years ago before this development was built out. And it connects to Woodman Place in Martin's Landing. And the citizen or the resident that lives adjacent to this has requested if we, the city, would either abandon or dispose of this property to her. Now, there's a couple things we'd have to do first. The first step would be to find out if the mayor and council would like to dispose of this property, and then we'd have to go through a few next steps. One thing I wanted to make you aware of, normally we would protect these links, but in 1998, we learned through our research, staff uncovered that this small piece of property here, the blue, was actually abandoned to Martin's Landing residents back almost 25 years ago. At that time, Greyhawk Lane was not in Roswell. It was an unincorporated Fulton County, and there were concerns that the roadway would connect into a future neighborhood. So they, at that time, petitioned to get a small piece of right-of-way disposed of to the residents. So the link is basically severed at this point. Is it possible to restore it? Yes, but the city would have to acquire it and buy it using eminent domain or negotiate a purchase. In my experience, some neighborhoods have been shown opposition to new connections, but the resident is asking if we would consider this piece now that it's severed. We got an appraisal on the property. It is worth approximately $17,600. And the other thing we wanted to point out was they have been maintaining the property. I think I have a picture of it here. This is what it looks like today. There's fences on both sides, and if there was a roadway here, it would go between these two storm drains and go up the hill to the left. The residents been mowing this, watering it, and putting down new pine straw. So they are concerned that now that they know this is city-owned property, there's a maintenance responsibility that they have inquired that, we may have to pay for if we don't dispose of this property. So staff wanted to get your guidance on if you would like to continue to hold this property or explore options to dispose of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So I will say I am typically very, very hesitant to giving up right-of-way. I think there's a lot of long-term reasons or benefits just in case of having right-of-way. That being said, this one I would see as one of the exceptions. And so I was on council when this property got approved, and certainly saw the focus of many residents there that did not want the connection. I was not aware of that blue section, so that makes it an even easier decision to potentially give it away. But even without that, I can confidently say I think there'd be no interest in having the connection right here. And anecdotally, I'll mention that there was definitely someone who even got up that said they're typically for just the more development, the better, the more connectivity, the better. And so it pained them to put on a red shirt to oppose this one because this is right where they lived. So, but nonetheless, I think there's clearly no real reason or benefit right now to be putting, or any time in the future, be putting a connection through there. But every other time I feel you're going to want to discuss right away, I feel it's better if the city is keeping it.
Councilmember Hall.
Is there a homeowners association here?
Yes. For Greyhawk Lane, there is a homeowners association. There's approximately 17 homes in this phase. They also had reached out to me last year to find out what this parcel may become. They had also had concerns about it or expressed some interest in it. I reached out to the former HOA president last week. They indicated they didn't have an appetite to acquire the property, even though they had previously expressed some interest in it, for like a playground or dog park or something like that. But to my knowledge, they have backed off of that.
And the neighbor on the other side?
I have only been in communication with one of the neighbors. One thing that we've been talking with our legal office about is if the city were to dispose of this property, state law, I believe, requires that the city would contact both residents on each side to say, are you interested? Are you interested? And if they both are, then you would split the parcel in half, 50-50.
Okay.
And if only if one party was interested, then you could continue forward.
And so all parties, or it would be advertised or announced that HOA could come back, both neighbors could come back?
That would be, I want to make sure I'm saying this right, Michael, but I believe we would have to do some kind of formal notice besides the letters.
Right, so there's state law about how the process to do this. We would have to provide notice to adjacent property owners. So at this point, all we were wanting from you guys was just if you were interested in us exploring this. If you are interested in us doing that, we're not asking for a vote today. I think what we would do is bring it back to you in closure to talk about disposing of it. But just wanted to get the feel for it. But there are certain notice requirements about who can buy it and how much it can be sold for and stuff. That's under state law.
Thank
Mayor Wilson.
A couple of questions. How many times has the city done this particular disposal request? How many times has it been granted in the last 20 years?
I've only been here 5 years, but I believe there's been a few occasions we have done this. I know we actually explored something 20 years ago on a little spur street off of near Roswell Area Park that was disposed of, where the small stub road was cut 50/50 and given to the two property owners adjacent to it. But that, again, that was 20 years ago via quitclaim deed. There may be others as well, but I'm not familiar with that.
A follow-up question, Mike, you said, and I want to ask a follow-up question on this. So you said that you were at a council meeting where did the city actually buy this property?
No, so the city already owned it, and this development was being discussed for approval. And a part of the proposal or requirement was that there be a street right here. And so basically, many of the residents in the existing previous neighborhood, they filled up the council chambers.
So it's fair to say that this council, I think, probably shares a couple of philosophical beliefs about this issue. One, not only are we not advocating, but we wouldn't be in support of creating a new cut-through street. That's not a hard one. I think everybody kind of feels the same way about that. I don't think it's any great,
I would agree.
And maybe that's not been a shared philosophy by all councils in the past, but this council and mayor say, no, man, we're not going to support a cut-through street. But it is problematic, generally speaking, when you own property to let it go without something, maybe creating something out of it or something better or some understanding, particularly when it goes from a government authority back to a personal property owner. So that does sound problematic, and I'm curious that, yes, ma'am, you were saying something?
Except the owners are the ones who've been mowing it and maintaining it.
Yes, ma'am.
Not the
It's,
city having a
this
big district.
this is not a place for public comment.
I
Yes.
wasn't commenting, you said yes,
Well,
ma'am.
you were talking to Michael while I was talking, so that's commenting.
To me.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Please continue, Mayor Wilson.
So it doesn't make sense for me to necessarily automatically give up property to a private property owner without an understanding of what, just simply turning it back over to me seems problematic. Obviously the issue is those folks want to know we're not going to create a street there. And I don't know if an ordinance has long-lasting effect enough to do that. But I do also see it problematic when you just simply turn property back over that the city owns. That seems problematic to me.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Just piggybacking off the mayor's comments, is this simply us allowing the discussion to go further for the sale of the property to either the HOA or the landowners on either side? If that's the case, I'm fine with that. What I'm not fine with is just giving the property away.
And I can answer that. So there's a two-step process. We'd have to abandon it as a public roadway, and then we can talk about selling it. We're not talking about giving it away. We're talking about disposing of it by sale, which was what we would bring to you in closure to discuss.
Yes, Councilmember Hills.
The property, we haven't really done anything with it as a city. It's been parked until one of the homeowners or the HOA approached the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's 17 homes?
In this phase of this subdivision, yes, but there's been no plans by the city to do any type of facility there, transportation-wise.
How large is the entire neighborhood that it's part of, and does it have a playground, or is this even something that they could entertain as multi-use or common area in there? I'm not trying to figure out how they do it if they wanted it, but I'm just curious.
It's 17 homes. I want to say the street is about third of a mile long. But to my knowledge, there's no common area, there's no swim tennis, there's no playground, at least in this immediate area.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Morthland.
Just out of curiosity, the individual that's reached out to us for this property, it looks like number 3070.
Yes.
Have they given us any kind of plans for if they were to acquire the property, what they would do with it?
All the communication's been on the phone, but they've indicated they would likely just take it over and likely extend their fence line along the back and just make it part of their typical yard.
That's kind of what I was shooting for, is just keep it as raw land. But
I'm not aware of any plans to do additions or add-ons or anything like that, but I could be glad to reach out and research that before it comes back for any further action.
yeah, the reason I bring that up is because the other neighbor on the other side, if they found out they were putting in a 3-car garage or something like that, that would extend over, that would be problematic possibly, but just doing a bigger yard, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
All right. This was yes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hills.
One other thing, let's say that the homeowner buys it or we give it to them, I don't know, they end up with it. What happens with those 2 storm drains? I mean, is there an easement or something, or we just have the right to go in if we need to clean out? How does that work? I know they're talking about the city maintaining it if they don't get it. What are the ramifications on the other end if it were to not be ours anymore?
I would need to double check with the official plat, but if those are in the right of way, they're ours. If they're on private property, they're probably the homeowner's maintenance responsibility, and it depends on how it's recorded on the plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This was brought forward as a discussion item. Are there any further comments at the moment? If I understood this discussion correctly, I believe you're okay with us moving to the next step at least. Is that correct? All right. Thank you. I hear head nods, and I think we'll take this to the next step and obviously bring this back to you with additional information. All right, the next item, item number 5, is a discussion of proposal for Scott Road Lighting Project.
So this is also a discussion of a project that we have included in our FY23 budget. I wanted to bring it back up and run through it briefly with you all. Just a short segment of the slides that are in your package. But basically, we have a bit of a dark area along Scott Road, and we'll show you that in a minute, where we've had some traffic and pedestrian public safety issues. Go to the next slide. This is an area that we're talking about along Scott Road that did not, at the time it was developed, include sufficient street lighting. If you go to the next slide, this is that area at night. And how many pedestrians do you see? I'll take any guesses, but you can see a couple. Okay, Dave. There's a lot of high school students in that picture at night, and it's very difficult to see. We've had some public meetings over in that area, and I think most folks on council and the residents have experienced that. We've received requests for lighting in this area, but have had for some time a temporary or a semi-temporary moratorium on additional street lights because of the cost of electricity in the city's enterprise agreement. Next slide. So this is the area in terms of its current lighting. The yellow lights that are shown are proposed for a pilot installation of 4 solar lights. At this point in time, this was reviewed with council a couple of years ago by a prior council, but at that time we didn't get very far in moving forward with it for 2 reasons. One, the cost, and COVID-19 really put a hamper on our ability to pursue this. With today's market environment, we believe that solar lighting is much more attractive in this area because there was not electricity and conduit run along Scott Road. So we'd like to test that out in these 4 locations, and that's got a very modest cost of about $30,000. If that's successful, we can go to the next slide. Oh, well then that's all that we were talking about. There is a rest of the story that would include more lighting to fill in the entire void if the solar lights work out well. Both of those are included in phase 1 and phase 2 of a project in the FY23 budget. We would start with this, and we mainly wanted to bring it to you because if you all support this, we would be able to move forward with that phase 1 project quickly after the budget is approved and get them installed before the school year starts next year. At least that would be our plan. Then we'll see how they go, and we could install the rest of them, which the total cost is about, is it 240 for everything, Mushtaba? I'm sorry, and that's Mushtaba Ali Mohammadi, who's been our traffic engineer and put together this revised proposal, which is quite a bit less expensive than our last proposal that we reviewed a couple of years for the electrical installation. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have today.
Yes, Councilmember Hills, sorry.
Thank you. I love this. I like everything about it. Can we start tomorrow? I know it's just discussion, but I'd like to vote on it now. Having known my way around both of the Roswell high schools, Centennial being one of them, I've been in that pitch black dark, and it is terrifying. Not because of the boogeyman, but because you can't see anything. So I think this is a great idea, great solution. Love the solar. I would like to fast track as soon as some data is after these are installed and get going on the rest of the project. I'm all in.
Mayor Wilson.
Forgive me, why is it just a discussion item?
The primary reason for that is that we had written it up and included it in the FY23 budget proposals as a item for the FY23 budget. And I would add to that, we're currently at the end of the fiscal year. Tend not to want to start a project right now unless we're sure we've got the money to do it, and our money is running a little bit low in the department overall. However, there's one other reason, and we probably couldn't get the materials to actually do this until June, July, even if we started the procurement now. So I think with this guidance, once the budget is approved, we can get materials ordered, and we wouldn't be taking receipt of them until the next fiscal year anyway. So I don't think we can really speed it up much more in spite of the desire to get it in yesterday. The supply chain will take over and probably slow us down until the summer no matter what.
But you could change, with that very logical perspective, but you could do phase 1 and phase 2 rather than just doing phase 1 if the council were so inclined.
Yes, sir.
And looking at it, you're doing phase 1, I imagine, just to be incredibly conservative.
We just want, this is our first experience with solar lighting and installing it ourselves, so we would like to just make sure we know how well they operate, and also it'll help us with the spacing of the lighting to actually see them performing at an intersection.
So ideally, when would phase 1 occur?
As soon as we can get the budget approved, we would begin the ordering process. That could be as early as May or June, depending on when you all approve the budget.
And obviously, how long will it take you to ascertain if phase 1 is a success?
Couple of dark nights.
Couple of dark nights? So then what would it look like for us to move on phase 2, to Councilmember Hill's perspective? Like if this works, it makes sense, this council, I believe, probably would be very aggressive about trying to do this project.
Before
In that
football
case,
season.
I think one of the things that we could do is initiate this procurement with the pilot phase included and the subsequent materials ordering, so we could approve that secondary delivery and potentially get them in over the summer. Is that overstating our capabilities? Mushtaba?
As far as capability is concerned, no, that is correct. But you know, there are batteries involved, and we would like to see if, you know, if we have 7 days of cloudy weather, does that work well? Can we program them to come on certain times, and things that may be a little bit more than just a couple of dark nights to test them.
I think that's fair and reasonable. I think Councilmember Hills is saying, if it works, if you get it done in May or June, she's saying, man, I'd sure like to see this up before school gets back in the fall.
Heard and understood.
Council agree with that?
Yes, Councilmember Palermo, did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, definitely completely agree with Councilmember Hills and Mayor Wilson, and just want to say thank you for bringing this forward, and also just really excited about the solar, both, of course, environmental aspect, but also just the maintenance cost aspect of electricity compared to solar. So happy about that. But most importantly, our number one job being, dealing with safety, and of course, no more important place than outside one of our schools, and so such a dark area. So again, just appreciate this and appreciate you doing everything you can to fast track it, knowing this council's sentiment.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
I think it's a great idea, and as with Councilmember Hills, I've spent a lot of time over there, and it's very dark. Just a question, how long do the batteries typically last on these type of fixtures?
This one, we have been told that they last up to 7 days.
They last up to 7 days on a full charge, and then as far as the life cycle of the battery? 5 years? Thank you.
So follow-up question, what's replacement cost?
Well, everything is just skyrocketing now, but for these 4, we have a quote for $22,000. That does not include installation costs.
Were you talking about replacement batteries? Or
Yes, sir. So for every 5 years, you're going to be replacing the batteries, is that right?
Right now, every one of them costs $300.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Just for my own clarification, let's assume that money fell from the sky. What is the fastest amount of time you could have those up?
That'll depend almost entirely on the supplier's delivery timetable. Do we know that currently, Mahatma? 2 months? That's a good number?
2 months.
2 months is approximately the quickest we can get the equipment.
Let me offer something, and I may be stepping out here a bit, but it seems that the council certainly is interested in moving this along as quickly as possible, given the location, obviously at a high school, and just the fact that there are a number of school-aged children there, and you're going to have football season coming in the fall, and that will exacerbate the amount of pedestrian traffic there. So if we have an opportunity as a staff to take a look at our overall budget, and if there is an opportunity perhaps to identify some cost savings in the current year budget that could be devoted to this project, would you be interested in us bringing that forward to you and moving this project along as quickly as possible? Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
You didn't let me ask you if you could find some in the sky.
So, all right, so with that, and this was a discussion item, but we certainly understand very clearly the public safety aspect of this and seeking to move this along as quickly as possible, and we'll work with Dan and our finance office to determine if there are funds available that could accelerate this project. Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Last thing from me, who brought this up? Because I owe somebody a hug. This is awesome.
Moshtaba.
You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'll catch you.
All right, great. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Item number 6 is an administration item, but I believe there is it's a time-sensitive issue. Consideration of a resolution to submit a grant proposal to the 2022 AARP, formerly American Association of Retired Persons Community Challenge Grant Program. Mr. Blitch?
Good evening. Thank you very much for letting us bring this to you off cycle. Like the city administrator said, we're here because we're under a little bit of a deadline. We believe that this has legs as a grant proposal because it is creative and innovative, and it is something that benefits the entire community, especially our nonprofit sector. So I'm going to introduce Megan. She's one taking the lead on this grant.
Mayor, council members, Mr. Knighton, this will sound familiar to you. I believe all of you were in the Administration and Finance Committee meeting on January 11th, at which time we proposed to submit a grant to the Georgia Power Foundation for this very purpose. We would like to buy a digital subscription to the foundation directory online to be housed at the Roswell Library across the street. The subscription allows for individual nonprofits and also students seeking scholarships or artists seeking fellowships to research those opportunities at the library without having to pay for those subscriptions individually at home. We believe this is a great community benefit. Unfortunately, the Georgia Power Foundation has changed its rules for application. Those are now by invitation only for governmental units. We have not as yet received that invitation, but we do have the opportunity to apply for this same grant to the AARP Community Challenge for 2022, and would need to do so by March 22nd, which is why we cannot return to admin and finance directly, and so we are coming to you.
Yes,
Happy to answer any question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from Mayor and Council? Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Just to clarify, this is the same item that was discussed on the 11th, and it's just that opportunity didn't present itself, so this is another opportunity, and costs are, and matches are the same.
The costs are the same. We are requesting, the grant request would be for $6,700, $6,738.75. We are also proposing that our match be $2246.25. Sorry, I should be specific. That's $2,246.25, just to demonstrate that we are committed to this for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions from Mayor and Council? Yes, Councilmember Hills.
How does this go if you don't receive the grant money? What's the next, what's Plan B? Or C, yes.
Yes. Well, we are the grants division. We're always happy to look for grants. And so we could look for other opportunities to apply elsewhere. We could also seek it as a budget item. At present, this grant request would be for a 3-year subscription. If we were to go for a budget item, it would be an annual consideration.
All right. Any further questions or comments from Mayor and Council? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to move this item forward.
Motion to move it forward.
A motion from Councilmember Hall, second from Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one final item under other items. Consideration of a resolution opposing House Bill 1093 and Senate Bill 494, and opposing limitation on a municipality's authority to make housing, land use, and zoning decisions within a local government's geographical boundaries. There is a proposed resolution, I believe, in your packet that speaks to this issue. This is something that has been mentioned intensely by the Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. The concern is that, from their perspective, it preempts local governments from regulating land use decisions as it relates to rental properties. I believe Sandy Springs and Alpharetta have already passed resolutions in opposition of this House bill and Senate bill. This is being brought before you for your consideration of whether you would like to move forward with a resolution in opposition of this legislation. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
First of all, Mr. Knight, and I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. I know you had brought it up to me. I think you had, I'm sure you brought it up to probably the mayor and council members if they didn't see it on their own. But again, I definitely appreciate you paying attention to any time there's legislation that potentially is going to be taking away really local control, which I believe is so important for our residents and the opportunity for our residents to really have an active voice in their community. So I strongly support this resolution. I strongly support us standing with Alpharetta and standing with Sandy Springs, who has taken certainly took a lead on this, on raising awareness. And given the timing as well, what I'd like to bring up is, so certainly I'll be in support tonight of moving this resolution forward. I'd actually like to request of you, Mr. Knight, and actually of you, Mayor Wilson, to really stay on top of really when a vote is potentially going to come or anything like that, because I actually believe this is so important that we should look at having a special called meeting to potentially get this resolution to our delegation, because obviously nobody in this room votes on Georgia state laws. But of course, we have a delegation of state representatives and state senators that cover Roswell. And just as Alpharetta and Sandy Springs sent a resolution to their delegation, I believe we should do the same and potentially do it from a special called meeting. So I just wanted to share those comments. But again, I think this is very important, really, for our residents.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Councilman Member Palermo. You're spot on. This issue is so paramount to being a local township, a local city. There is probably very few other issues that strike, regardless of where you fall on the kind of housing and the kind of zoning you have. You believe that as a local township, as a local city, that you should have the right through your community, through your residents, through your elected representatives to make decisions for yourself. And I think it crosses all political boundaries. And this issue to me is almost has such unanimity, I think, almost all areas of our residency, that I almost made the same mistake that I made 2 weeks ago. Because to me, I was just going to bring it to council for resolution because it seemed just like such a non-brainer. And thank goodness the good Lord got a hold of my head and said, take it off the resolution, bring it to committee so we can have discussion on this matter in committee rather than taking it straight to the council. But I believe that the resolution on this is so unanimous because I believe that regardless of where people fall on the political spectrum about zoning or any other issues, I believe that almost all of us feel like we have the right and should have the right to make decisions at a local level about these kind of decisions. And it's so obvious that it obviously needs to be yelled from the mountaintops. Our sister cities of Sandy Springs and Alpharetta have already made resolutions and sent them to our delegation to the state legislature. And of course, this request is for us to do this now. And I think, Mike, Councilmember Palermo, you're exactly right. It's worthy of us having a special session ourselves to vote on this as a resolution to send it immediately to the state legislature to let us know that as the elected representatives of the residents of Roswell, we feel absolutely convicted that the rights of a township, of a city, need to be protected to make decisions for your own residents.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Hills.
Same sentiment. Yes, we are representing our residents, the most important reason we're here. Absolutely, we're going to do what we were designed to do, and that's take local control seriously and manage that well. I'm in full support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right. With that, then we'll entertain a motion for moving this forward. Motion by Councilmember Hills?
Yes.
Second by Council? No, clarifying. All right. We have a motion first. Let's entertain a second, and then we'll have discussion, if that's okay. Is there a second?
There's not a
Clarify the motion. Okay. Please, go ahead.
I'd like to amend the motion to include calling a special call council meeting as soon as possible so that we can pass this.
Councilmember Hills, I'm assuming you are amenable to that amendment to your motion?
Adding your amendment, yes.
All right. Motion then, as amended, Councilmember Hills, second, Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you so much. It does pass. All right. Thank you very much. With that, that does conclude our committee meetings for this evening, and we'll entertain a motion for an adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Vanstrom, second by Councilmember Palermo. All those in favor, thank you very much. Thank you.